All you really need to create art is an idea. Start there. A piece of inspiration, colors that entrance you, a glimmer of an image you see in your mind or in a dream. Then collect supplies, a brush, some paint, a little bit of water, and a surface to create on. Hi, I'm Jennifer Evans. Through my art making experience, I have been drawn to experiment with all different tools and supplies to communicate ideas. That's what's known as mixed media, using more than one medium. I love the visual texture of layering colors with paint and collage. There have even been serendipitous moments where bits of paper jump out at me to be included in a piece, and it fits with the theme perfectly. I know from experience that art supplies can be costly. That's why I've compiled a list of my favorite materials to show you what I consider to be mixed media necessities. Then you can decide what you like and what's worth the investment. Acrylic paint. It's pretty much the standard for any mixed media artist starting out. But you'll find that once you get past the craft aisle and those types of acrylic paints and wander toward the fine art section of the store, suddenly there are so many more choices. I'm just going to do a rundown of what's available here in the different consistencies. First, there's acrylic ink. This can be used with a dip pen or a fine line brush for detail work, or it can also be used as a wash over another layer of paint. Moving along, between a consistency of the regular acrylic and an ink would be fluid acrylics. These are used quite often with a pouring medium to do paint pours, but they can also be used to stain or do a wash. So it's a little bit more fluid, as the name implies. You can drip it, you can put it in a spray bottle, and it will also tell you on here, once it's dry, what the transparency looks like, how opaque or transparent it is according to the coverage on these black hash marks. Next, we have soft body acrylics, and these are pretty much what we mean when we refer to standard acrylics. This is a new packaging by Liquitex, but it's still soft body. And this is going to be great coverage, nice and workable. It's pretty much what we think of when we say acrylic paint. Then moving on to an artist quality paint. These are two new colors by Golden for 2019. They are really, really great paints to work with. The quality is spectacular. I also really enjoy using these open acrylics, which are slow drying. They don't dry out as fast on your palette, which means you can work with them longer. And that's something that I like because I might be in the studio for several hours at a time and I don't want to be wasting a lot of paint that's drying out quickly on my palette. So you can work with these a lot longer, and I find that I'm reaching for these a lot more nowadays. And then we have a heavy body acrylic. This can be used with a palette knife for some nice texture. It also will hold a brush stroke, so you can get some nice texture. It's kind of like using oil paint, but doesn't take as long to dry as an oil. It'll dry in a couple hours or overnight. So you can also scribe through it. When I say scribe, Catalyst makes these wonderful tools that you can use to pull through the paint and make some texture marks. They come with some nice wedges that you can hold in your hand. Here's another shape. I sometimes just like to use an old gift card or a hotel room key plastic card to pull the paint or scribe through it. I also like these tools, which they call them paint erasers, but they have a rubber tip, and because you can hold it just like a drawing tool, you can get really precise textures. Sometimes I even use the flat ones to apply the paint, which is a different use for it, but another way to get visual texture into your mixed media paintings. I love gouache. I found this pretty recently and I absolutely love it because you can get it to work like a watercolor, but it's actually acrylic. So all of the things that you love about watercolor, being able to do a wet into wet technique like this one, and getting these exciting bursts of color, you can do with gouache, but it won't reactivate once it's dry like some watercolors do. You can use it in a layer in your mixed media art. You can get it to drip and do layers in your artwork that way. If you wanted to, you could come over the top of this when it's dry and continue to work over it. It's got wonderful colors. Liquitex recently came out with their own brand of gouache, and as you can see, I've been experimenting with this quite a lot. I like their brand. I love Holbein. It's just been really lovely to work with gouache. Next up, collage. Now this is a pretty wide category, but I love old vintage music sheets, book paper. You want to go to the flea market and track down anybody that is looking to get rid of old ledgers like these. This I think is 1878. Do you believe that? Can't even believe that. That's somebody's handwriting. That's another note. Old lace tablecloths that you can cut up, doilies, tissue paper. Of course, I love old seamstress patterns, handmade paper. This is a bit of cheesecloth stuck in there, wrapping paper, corrugated cardboard, embossed paper. I don't particularly love the fact that this is metallic, but I like the embossed print of this, and I could easily cover that up and just use the texture of it in a piece. You can also stamp with corrugated cardboard, handmade papers. This one has some dried petals in it. Just yummy, yummy stuff to collage into your pieces. If I have a collage materials, I have to have something to adhere them to my surface. So matte medium is terrific for that. Golden and Liquitex both make terrific matte mediums, and that is basically the base of an acrylic paint without the pigment, without the color in it. So this is very archival and it will dry matte, whereas something like a decoupage medium still might have a sheen to it, can be sticky forever. This is more archival. Next up, I like water-soluble crayons and pencils. Anything that I can use either on its own or activate with water. These are Neo colors, top on my list. I love those. This is a scribble stick by Dina Wakely, and this is a Derwent Inktense pencil. So if I wanted a finer line on something, I could draw with that and then take water on a brush and activate it. And then once this dries, it is permanent. So I can get a watery effect, or I can wash it over something that's already dry. Let's do that here. So I can give that a tint. So you can get all kinds of interesting effects, layers and layers of color and texture by using your water-soluble materials. Then, not to be left out, we have our permanent materials, and the China markers are terrific, and I've actually found this red one at the hardware store. I have found that Sharpie makes them in blue, yellow, white, and black. So these are great because they draw on any surface. My next must-have for mixed media are stencils. These are some of my designs, and stencils are a great way to layer some visual texture and pattern into your work. This is the Wheels mask. They come in all sizes. This is kind of a mid-century modern design. There are so many techniques that you can utilize with stencils. It's really mind-blowing. You could spend just a ton of time working with stencils in your mixed media work and be very happy. The color wheel is always a handy reference tool. It's helpful to go back to the basics. If I'm working on a piece and the colors just aren't working together quite right, or I'm looking for a different combination, I can choose triads or tetrads on the color wheel. Or if I want something that's high contrast, I could jump across the color wheel and use complementary colors. Or if I wanted to select adjacent colors on the color wheel, whether I want to stay in the warm tones or the cool tones, the color wheel is always a handy reference tool to have. And of course, under it all, I always start with a good coat of gesso. There are plenty of brands of gesso and everybody has their favorite. My current favorite is this Liquitex professional grade gesso. I use it under all of my pieces and I'm never disappointed. The paint will glide, you'll have a much better application, and it's just wonderful to start out with. It's kind of like your warm-up.